Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video I'm going to be talking with you guys about a topic that I frequently get asked about and that I think is very important for people who collect dolls or really who collect any sort of collectibles, so to speak. And that is the topic of insuring your collection. So a lot of people will sometimes assume that maybe their collection is already covered under their homeowners or renters policy, but that's not necessarily true. It depends on the company with which you have the policy, and it depends on a lot of different factors about your policy. So I want to talk to you guys about all the steps that I've gone through to be sure that my collection was insured. I want to talk to you about the maintenance of that policy because it does have to be maintained, and I want to tell you about what you can do to get yourself insured if you're not already insured or you're not sure if your collection is insured. So the first thing and the most important thing if you're considering having your collection insured is that you need to have excellent records about the dolls that you have and about the value of those dolls. And so what I do is I have a spreadsheet. I actually use Google Sheets because that's out in the cloud. So if something were to happen, like my house were to burn down, there's not a physical record somewhere sitting around of my dolls. I've actually got it stored in the cloud, so I could go pull that from another computer when I got a new computer or whatever, and I would be able to access all of the records of my dolls. And so what I've done for you guys is I've made a template, and it's very simple, and there's probably lots of other things that other people might add to it, but I'm going to share that in the video description below, the link to the template, and you guys are welcome to go download that template and use it for yourself for keeping your own records about your dolls. So what I do, in addition to having a YouTube channel, and so we're going to talk about that too in just a minute, what I do is I have two tabs on my sheet, and one of those tabs is the tab of my current doll collection, and so I've put an example in there, which is my Tender Creation Victoria. So I have her in there, I have the original cost in there, I have the present value of the doll, because the thing is with my insurance, I want replacement. I don't want the value of what I paid for the doll, because when I paid for the doll may have appreciated in value since the time that I paid for that doll. So I have the present value as well, and then I have some notes to myself, and the notes are, how did I pay for this doll? And the reason for that is that your insurance company is going to ask you for some sort of proof. So even if the doll has appreciated in value, if you have a catastrophe, say there's a natural disaster, you have a fire, or somebody steals your dolls, which luckily dolls aren't really earmarked for theft in a home invasion, and I'll talk more about that in a minute as well, but I keep notes of how it was paid for. So for example, I paid this via wire transfer from my bank on this date. So if I need to go pull those records at some point for my insurance company, I've got the notes there to let me know where I paid for it and where I can get the information, because luckily the bank, PayPal, all these sorts of things, they're going to keep those records, again, in the cloud for you, and you should be able to access them for many, many years. And so I like to put that also on my spreadsheet. Now on my other tab, I have a list of incoming dolls, and so I keep the same records, but the only thing that I have different is I have an estimated arrival date on there, just so I can kind of keep up with when I'm expecting those dolls in. And then once those dolls arrive, I just take that line item, or I take that row from my spreadsheet, and I move it over to the doll spreadsheet, so they're no longer incoming. Once they're actually in my collection, I move it over. You also have to remember as you sell dolls to delete dolls from your spreadsheet. So you don't want to have dolls on there that are actually no longer in your collection, because that would be insurance fraud if you ever got to a point where you had to collect on the insurance from your dolls. So make sure that you keep your records current. That's something that's hard for me to do, so I'm telling you to do it, and I'm going to say do as I say and not as I do, because it is hard for me to keep those records current. I don't sit down and do it as often as I should, but I have decided kind of this year to do better with that and try to keep up with those records more often and try to keep them more current in the event of a catastrophe. Luckily, I work from home now and I'm home all the time, so I would think if there were any sort of fire or catastrophe, I may be able to prevent it from being too bad, or I may be able to, call for help in time. So anyway, that's just my hope, but that's that. So you want to make sure you have these excellent records for your insurance company. Another great thing is to have video evidence. So that is honestly one of the things that's always been in my mind about my YouTube channel. Any dolls that I get in, they are documented through YouTube. Now, whether I, have the price list on that or not, that would be something that would be easier to go back and find, because the insurance company can see, hey, yeah, she just opened a Tender Creation doll. That's in her collection now. So I have proof and I have evidence that that doll is in my collection. I also do a doll room tour about once a year. I haven't done one of those lately, but I owe one to you guys, so I'm going to be doing it soon. This room's just kind of a mess right now, and I was hoping to do some upgrades before I did another tour. But anyway, I do that, and that also helps for record keeping and documentation for your insurance company, because you need to have proof that those items were in your possession and in your collection. Now, that being said, so homeowner's policy, mine is actually protected under my homeowner's policy. And so what that is I'm going to show you guys a little snapshot of my homeowner's policy. So you can see dwelling. Dwelling is insured at $175. The dwelling is the actual house, my stick-built house. If it burns to the ground and it needs to be rebuilt, they will provide $175 to have my house rebuilt. And so that should cover it. As I've told you guys before, I live in a small house in a less expensive area. So, the cost of living here is pretty low, so that should cover rebuilding my house. My mom built a house next door to me, and that's right in line with that. Now, most people on their personal property coverage, so this is what I want you guys to pay attention to. Most people on their personal property coverage will cover the personal property loss inside the house for around 40% of what their dwelling is. So that's going to be your stuff like your furniture, your televisions, your computers, your appliances in your kitchen, all that sort, your clothing, the stuff that, may go up in smoke if you were to have a fire, or if there were. The only natural disaster, knock on wood, that we've luckily ever had in this area is we had a hurricane come through back in 1988. So I've been living in this area since then, since I was a kid, and it did tear up a lot of houses and stuff. But luckily I don't live in a flood area. I don't live in an earthquake area. I say that. We have felt earthquakes here before, but just really brief ones. But the biggest thing for me is that my concern is fire damage or tree damage, because I live on a wooded lot, and so if we had high winds like a hurricane or heavy storms and a tree were to fall, because there are some trees right outside this room, if a tree were to fall through this room, it's going to damage everything in its path, right? So that's a concern. Theft is not as much of a concern as mine, because I live in a pretty safe area. Our crime statistics are really low. And when I talk to the insurance company, dolls are not one of those things that are typically a target of theft. Thieves don't really, they would have a hard time, because you think about a doll, especially like, let's say somebody came in here and took my Pasha Pasha Loki doll. Everybody knows that that's my doll. A thief is going to have a very hard time selling that doll and not getting caught. Jewelry is a different story. So I know a lot of people have separate policies or separate clauses in their insurance to protect engagement rings and things like that. And you have to have a separate policy for that. So with my homeowner's insurance, there is a jewelry policy that you can add on to protect your jewelry. Luckily for me, I don't have a lot of valuable jewelry because I spend all my money on dolls. So I have a few pieces of nice jewelry, but none of them are over the threshold that would require a separate clause in my policy or separate protection to protect my jewelry. So what I did is I had called my insurance company to be sure that my dolls are protected under the personal protection policy, and they are, but I went ahead and upped some of that personal property, I think I said that wrong, the personal property coverage to be sure it would cover my dolls as well. Now, the things that I did not include in that are like my yard sale dolls. I have a lot of dolls here that I bought for $1 here or there that I love, but they're not super valuable. So I didn't put any of those in there. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you guys, I have right now I have 197 entries in my spreadsheet of dolls that are valuable enough to me to be considered for my insurance policy. But luckily, mine is covered under the homeowner's personal property situation, or the umbrella there for my dolls. So I'm good with that. That's how mine is covered. And it's because as they told me that, now this is my insurance company, which is Travelers, by the way. I have Travelers through Geico, in case you're wondering. I made sure, I let them know, some of these dolls are expensive, but because it's not jewelry or it's not something that would typically be targeted, because she said, my agent said, typically we're worried about theft with these things and, not fire or natural disaster. And dolls are just not really a thing that people think about stealing. Again, because these are all one-of-a-kinds for the most part. People aren't going to really be able to sell these or do anything with them, where jewelry can be melted down and the stones can be removed and things like that. TVs are, they're all very generic. Nobody has a one-of-a-kind TV. Well, I guess somebody probably does, but it's not me, or, that sort of thing. So anyway, but what I also did, just so that you guys could get an idea, if that's not covered under your homeowner's policy, or if your homeowner's policy will not cover it, because some won't, there's mixed results out there. I've heard of people that have State Farm, and State Farm, one agent would not allow them to cover their collection under their policy, where one agent would allow them to cover their policy. So it's really dependent on your insurance company and your agent and things like that. So you have to make sure, you get all of that stuff straightened out or worked out, whatever, with your agent to be sure you're covered, because that's part of the thing about, there is some level of risk anytime you have an investment, there's some level of risk there. Even holding cash is a risk, because if there's inflation and you're just holding cash, your cash is not going to keep up with inflation. So there's risk involved with almost every type of investment, including dolls. Dolls, I don't look at them as an investment. It's something that brings me joy. I look at it more as a vacation. This is money spent. It's done. I've spent the money to enjoy it and have the experience. And then later, if I want to resell it, hopefully I get my money back. Sometimes you win and you get a little bit more back than what you spent. Sometimes you lose and you get less back than what you spent. So I don't really look at them as an investment, but technically they are, because there is some money invested in them. So you want to protect that investment that you have out there. And like I said, there's some risk associated with having that. But if you have your insurance, to cover you, that's even, that's some peace of mind that you can have about the investment that you've made. And so one thing for me too is, we've talked about buying and selling. I've talked about that on this channel. I did a video not too long ago about how to decide about selling dolls. Another thing that I didn't add in that video, but is actually a consideration of mine, is I like to keep the overall value of my collection under a certain amount, so that I don't have to A, change my policy for my insurance, B, I want to keep my risk at a certain threshold, because if you have $1 million worth of dolls, let's say, there's a bigger risk there than if you have $10,000 worth of dolls. So I try to keep under a certain amount of threshold of how much risk, so to speak, is in my dolls. It's the same thing with investments. Some people, you want to have a cash emergency fund, which is a very low risk. Cash is one of the lower risk things. Again, not totally non-risk, because if there's inflation, you lose a little bit. And then there's some people that invest everything in high risk stuff, like these GameStop people, if you guys have heard about that. So that's really high risk, and if you put your money in that, it's a high risk situation with some investments. These dolls are, I wouldn't say they're, I don't know, maybe low risk to medium risk, depending on how the valuation goes. But for me, I just like to keep my overall risk level under a certain dollar amount. So that's another reason for selling dolls sometimes. And I didn't get into that in the other video because it's like a whole financial class. I'm a financial nerd. I'm a CPA. You know, I love numbers, I love math, I love money, I love financial figures and talking about stuff like that. So for me, it's interesting. For you guys, it might be really boring, but it is important to understand, especially if you have a valuable doll collection. So I would say, you know, if your doll collection, if you were to lose it, if it's going to be devastating to you, or if it's going to be very upsetting to you, or if it's going to really hurt you financially, you want to make sure that's insured. So you want to make sure that it's covered somehow. If you rent your place and you don't have renter's insurance, I strongly recommend that you get that. But now, all that being said, so let's say, I think I went off on a tangent there, but let's say you're not covered under your homeowner's or your renter's policy. I went out and I got quotes. I got quotes from 2 places. Now, I got a quote, not necessarily for the value of my collection, but because I know what I pay for my homeowner's insurance. So my homeowner's insurance is around $1,300 a year. And that also this is going to depend on where you live. I live in South Carolina. Cost of living here is low. You know, costs are low in general. So things are going to cost different for me than they're going to cost somebody in New York City, where the cost of living is really high, or San Francisco. So anyway, I got 2 quotes, and what I did is just to compare apples to apples, is I did the same amount that's on my personal property coverage on my house, so we could just see the difference. So my house was $122,500 of personal property coverage, which includes everything inside the house. So that's furniture, but I went ahead and did that for the collectibles insurance too, just so you guys could get an idea. And so I contacted Antiques and Collectibles Insurance Group, and they have a form that you fill out. It's an application, and they'll get back to you with a quote. And to insure $120K annually is $393. So that's not terrible. That's really not bad. That $400 a year is worth the peace of mind, and you would be really glad you had it if something bad happened to your dolls. Another one I checked with was American Collectors Insurance, same amount of policy that I requested. It was $518.40 per year, but I believe they offered a little bit of extra coverage. Like, one of the things on their coverage line was stuff about items in transit. So I don't really know what all that covers, but I would guess if, you know, something was sent to you and it was damaged in transit to you, that maybe they would cover that. I don't really technically know, but anyway, I just wanted to get those quotes for you guys so you could get an idea of what kind of cost you're looking at. So it's around $400 to $500 to insure that amount of dolls. And like I said, I just put that number out there because that's what my actual homeowners has, and I just kind of wanted to get a comparison. So, but my homeowners covers my actual house, the dwelling itself, everything inside. So it's a little bit different, but that was the best comparison that I could come up with. But anyway, I think it's absolutely critical to have your collection insured, because if something bad happens to you, you're going to be sick over it. You do not want to, especially with a lot of these one-of-a-kind dolls, you know, you don't want to be, first of all, you may not even be able to replace the doll, right? So I've got some dolls here that are truly one-of-a-kinds that I would not be able to replace. The artist is not making those dolls anymore, doesn't have them anymore. If something happened to it, it's just going to be a devastating loss to me, but it's going to be less devastating because I do have it insured, so I can at least get the cash value, or I can get the value out of the doll, and I can try to replace it if I can find a replacement anywhere. So anyway, that is my nerding out with financial advice about your dolls, or it's really insurance advice. I'll leave links to the 2 collectible insurance companies that I talked about below in case you want to look into getting your own quote for your collection. I'm also going to leave a link to the template that I have created in Google Drive in case you want to download that spreadsheet yourself, or make a copy of it and save it in your own drive so that you have a template to start building your collection value off of. And of course, you'll want to delete my samples. I put a sample in both tabs, but you'll want to delete that, and so you can start building your own. and it will be saved out in the cloud as long as you have a Gmail address. You do have to have a Gmail address to use it, but it'll be saved out there in the cloud so that you'll have access to it in case, God forbid, your house does burn down or there's a natural disaster or something happens to your home and the contents of your home and therefore your collection. So anyway, guys, I hope you like this video. I know it is a little bit different than what I normally do, but I get asked this question a lot, and so I wanted to discuss it with you guys and let you know kind of my thoughts and feelings on it and how important I think it is if you do have a lot of value in your collection, and what steps you can do to protect yourself. So if you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. I will link all the stuff I talked about in the video description. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed, and we will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.